Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if those soft skills we hear so much about actually make a difference, especially in school and life? Well, this new study dives deep into just that question with a really cool project. They're talking about social, emotional, and behavioral skills, or SEB skills for short. Think of things like being able to manage your feelings, get along with others, and work towards your goals. These are the kinds of things that people often call soft skills or 21st century skills. For a long time, it has been a bit messy in psychology, with different people studying similar ideas but not always using the same language or definitions. This made it hard to really understand what we know about these skills. But recently, researchers have proposed a clearer way to define and measure these SEB skills. Kind of like a master map. This new framework is called the SEB Framework, and it helps us see SEB skills as actual abilities you can use, different from your personality traits, which are more like your usual tendencies. For example, you might be a naturally shy person. That is a personality trait. But if you can still give a great presentation when you need to, that is a social, emotional, behavioral skill you possess. This is super important, because imagine trying to build a big, impressive building without a solid blueprint. That is kind of what psychology research has been like sometimes. We get lots of individual studies, but bringing them all together to see the big picture is tough. Traditional science reviews are great, but they get old fast. With how quickly research happens, a review written today can be outdated in just a few years. So these researchers had a brilliant idea. What if we created a living review? This means the database and the review are constantly updated as new studies come out, like a real-time science feed. And for the SEB skills area, which is growing so fast, this is especially needed. They call it the Living SEB Skills Project. It is a project with three main parts. First, they're always searching for new research on SEB skills. Second, they've created a public online vault of all the studies they find, with all the important details coded and ready to go. And third, they've built a cool, easy-to-use website app where anyone can explore this data and even run their own mini meta-analyses. The goal is to make it easier for everyone to do science that builds on itself and is super transparent. To show how this project works, they decided to use the data they've collected so far to answer a really important question. How well do SEB skills predict academic achievement, like getting good grades? Let's talk a bit more about SEB skills themselves. The framework they're using breaks them down into 5 main categories, which kind of line up with the well-known Big 5 personality traits. We have innovation skills, which are about exploring new ideas. Then there are self-management skills about getting tasks done and staying organized. Social engagement skills are about interacting effectively with others. Cooperation skills are about building and maintaining good relationships. And finally, emotional resilience skills are about managing your emotions and bouncing back from tough stuff. Remember, these are about what you can do, not just what you usually do. It is the difference between your usual habit and your actual capability. And interestingly, studies are showing that these skills are not quite the same as personality traits. Sometimes your skills can be higher or lower than your typical personality. And that mismatch can predict different outcomes. The problem with so many studies popping up is that it is easy to get lost, or worse, for research to become fragmented. If we only look at a few studies, we might miss the bigger pattern or even get a biased view. That is where the living part of their project is so powerful. It's about keeping the science up to date and accessible, to make sure everything is super trustworthy. They've pre-registered all their plans and made all their data, code, and materials publicly available. This is a huge part of open science, meaning anyone can check their work and build upon it. They even followed strict guidelines for systematic reviews called PRISMA to make sure they were thorough. So how did they find the studies? They're doing this really smart thing called citation chaining. Instead of just looking for keywords, which can bring in a lot of unrelated stuff, they're finding papers that cite important early work on SEB skills. This helps them catch all the relevant studies. They're also updating this search every month. They had pretty clear rules for what studies they would include in their database. Basically, the studies had to be about SEB skills and use measuring tools based on the SEB framework. They excluded things like theses, conference abstracts, and books. And they focused on studies that reported actual quantitative data they could use for their analyses. Importantly, they only included studies written in languages they could understand: English, Italian, and Spanish. Once they had the eligible studies, they went through them and carefully coded a ton of information. This includes basic stuff like author and year, but also details about the participants, like their age and gender, the study design, and most importantly, the actual results like correlation coefficients, which tell us how strongly two things are related. They even created a codebook to classify all the different concepts and variables across all the studies. And to keep it living, they repeat this whole search and coding process every single month. They archive snapshots of the data monthly, so researchers can always refer to a specific version. They plan to keep doing this for a while, and they're even working on ways to make parts of this process more automatic in the future. Now, the coolest part for many people might be the Living SEB app. This is a web-based tool that makes all this data super accessible. You can search and filter studies, run meta-analyses, see results visualized, and even download data and code for your own research. It is designed to be user-friendly, even if you are not a statistics expert. So, what did they find with all this effort? As of the data they used for this paper, they identified over 360 publications. After all their filtering, about 30 studies made it into their living review, and 19 of those were good enough for quantitative analysis, meaning they had the data they needed. These 19 studies included a total of 26 independent samples, with a lot of participants, over 17,000. And within these studies, they coded over 17,000 correlation coefficients, showing the relationships between different SEB skills and other measures. This figure here, the Prisma flowchart, is like the journey of a research paper from finding it to finally including it in the analysis. It shows how many papers were initially found, and then how many were excluded at each step for various reasons. It's a standard way to show the transparency of the review process. This table gives you a snapshot of all the studies they included. You can see the author, the year it was published, the type of study, where it was done, how many people were in the study, and what it was mainly about. It's a great overview of the current landscape of SEB Skills research. Now for the exciting part, the results, and what they mean. They first ran a multi-level meta-analysis to look at how each of the 5 SEB skill domains relates to academic achievement. They used a sophisticated statistical model that accounts for the fact that multiple studies might be looking at the same thing. And here are the findings. For academic achievement, they found that 4 out of the 5 SEB skill domains had a positive and statistically significant link. This means that as these skills increase, academic achievement tends to increase too. The skill with the strongest link was self-management, with a correlation of 0.24. This is not a super huge effect, but it is a consistent positive trend across many studies. Emotional resilience skills had a smaller but still significant connection. So yes, generally speaking, having these skills is linked with doing better in school. But they didn't stop there. They wanted to see if SEB skills were important beyond just personality traits, and also if different SEB skills were uniquely important. For this, they used a more advanced technique called Meta-Analytic Structural Equation Modeling, or MASM. This is super powerful because it lets them look at the relationships between multiple variables at once, while still accounting for all the studies. This figure shows a big picture of how all the SEB skills and big 5 personality traits are related to each other and to academic achievement. As you can see, the SEB skills and their corresponding personality traits are quite similar, with correlation S over 0.62, but they are not identical. Interestingly, when looking at academic achievement, self, management skills, and conscientiousness, a personality trait, were the strongest predictors. Here is a really key finding. When they looked at SEB skills and personality traits together to predict academic achievement, they found that 3 of the SEB skills had a significant unique contribution. Innovation, self-management, and social engagement skills all predicted academic achievement even after accounting for their corresponding personality traits. This strongly suggests that these skills are more than just personality in disguise. They offer something extra. This table shows those results. For example, you can see that innovation skills had a significant positive impact on academic achievement. That is the beta estimate of 0.16, and the p-value is super low, meaning it is unlikely to be a fluke. This was true even when personality traits were already in the picture. Then they asked another important question within the SEB skills themselves: which ones are most important for academic achievement? They ran another analysis considering all 5 SEB skills together. The results here are also really telling. They found that self-management skills were the strongest predictor of academic achievement, even when you accounted for all the other SEB skills. The beta estimate here is a substantial 0.238, with a very low p-value. Interestingly, emotional resilience skills actually showed a small negative association in this model, which might be due to complex interactions or statistical suppression effects. This means that while self-management is clearly a powerhouse for academic success, the role of emotional resilience might be more nuanced when other skills are considered. So, what does all of this mean? The Living SEB Skills project is a fantastic initiative for keeping up with research in this area. The data they've collected and the tools they've built are incredibly valuable for researchers. The analysis they presented clearly shows that SEB skills are indeed linked to academic achievement. Self-management skills, in particular, stand out as being very important. They also showed that SEB skills offer unique benefits that aren't just captured by personality traits. The takeaway for us is that these skills are not just nice to have. They actively contribute to success, especially in areas like education. The fact that this project is so open and accessible means that research on SEB skills will likely move forward much faster and more reliably. It reduces the chances of researchers only picking studies that support their ideas, and it makes it easier for everyone to see what the evidence really says. Of course, no study is perfect. The researchers themselves acknowledge some limitations. For example, their current database mainly includes cross-sectional data, meaning it captures a snapshot in time. They'd like to include more longitudinal studies that track changes over time or experimental studies that test interventions. Also, they group different measures of the same concept together in their analysis. For more detailed questions, like how specific ways of measuring a skill might matter, researchers would need to do more in-depth analysis themselves. And while they're doing a really thorough job with their search strategy, there is always a small chance they might miss a study that doesn't cite the core SEB papers. They're encouraging researchers to submit any studies they might have missed. Looking ahead, they plan to expand the app to include analyses of longitudinal and experimental data, as well as ways to look at what factors might influence the relationships they're seeing. They're also hoping to automate more of the coding process in the future. In conclusion, this project is a testament to the power of open science and collaborative research. It provides a dynamic and transparent resource for understanding social, emotional, and behavioral skills. The initial findings confirm that these skills, particularly self-management, are important predictors of academic achievement and distinct from personality traits. It's exciting to see how this Living SEB Skills project will evolve and contribute to our understanding of what makes people successful, not just in school, but in life. And that is all for today's episode of RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment below with your thoughts on SEB skills, and don't forget to subscribe for more science explained simply. See you next time.